quick couple of thoughts about today's show. Second half topic is about street photography, and preceding that there's a 10-minute or so piece recorded with the amazing photojournalist Jason Florio, as he shares a very personal story photographing in New York on the day the Twin Towers fell. Now, there's a short dramatic editorial sequence into that piece, which I know for some people makes for difficult listening. I'm never quite sure whether we actually become, or some people can become, desensitized to that kind of material with how we consume graphic pictorial accounts of news stories across a myriad of platforms these days. But I thought I'd throw those thoughts into the mix before I press the play button for the theme tune this week.
The FujiCast.
Welcome to episode 7. By the way, because we had a couple of emails about this, about the mentioning episode number thing, you can now do it. It's legal.
Seven.
You are allowed to say it, and you can even put it on the app description as well. So all that stuff that was said a couple of weeks ago has gone. So if you're ever looking for an episode number from the past, it's going to be a lot easier now.
That's literally the best thing I've heard all week.
Job done. Right. This week we're going to be talking about street photography, and there's quite a lengthy question from Emily. Is it Rayner? Renier. And because I think she's been on a course of yours, hasn't she?
Yes, very much.
But there's quite a long question, but it's a really good question into talking about street photography. So I'm going to put that to the street photography pile for a moment, and we'll start with the questions. I do have a couple of bits here. First of all, though, some questions to answer. Ben Gillett said, loving the new podcast, great insights and chat, Neil and Kev. I absolutely love the main theme music. I would love to know what it's called and where to find it. Well, I think you'll find it on SoundCloud. It's Blue Wednesday, and it's called New Shoes.
New Shoes.
So that answers
I didn't know
that.
that. Boop, 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 boop.
New Shoes. Oh, there was a band called New Shoes, wasn't there?
I don't know.
No, okay.
I only like country and western.
Do you? No way.
Mostly, yeah.
You do like Glenn Campbell, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I liked him. He's dead.
Yeah.
I went to one of his last concerts, in fact.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, what a musician he was.
Excellent. Yeah.
So sad with the whole thing about him. It was Alzheimer's, wasn't
Alzheimer's, yeah. And actually, he was very confused on the stage, kept walking off and then coming back on.
Well, he played for years, didn't he, with the condition, and his family used to help him, and they made light of it, didn't they?
Yeah.
They'd say, Dad, we played that one before.
His daughter was the pianist, or keyboard player,
right?
If I remember rightly. And yeah, she's when I went to see him in Cardiff, she kept kind of nudging him and directing him back, and he had all of the lyrics were printed very big in front of him. But honestly, his guitar playing was
it faultless?
Faultless,
right.
Absolutely faultless. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And I'm glad I got to see him before he left this mortal coil, bless him.
Andy Brim, did anybody else notice that Monty Don, in his Japanese Gardens programme, I can't say I'm a watcher of that show, carries an X100T?
Monty Don. No, Monty Don. He is the guy off Gardener's World, isn't he?
Is he? I have no idea.
I think so. Isn't he? He's not the guy with the big telephone who stands there. I'm on the phone.
No.
That's Monty Jolly or something.
That's Dom Jolly.
Oh, Monty. Who's
Can't talk now. I'm on the phone. That one.
That's it.
Yeah. He's hilarious.
I see him at Kemble train station loads of times. He's never on a mobile phone, disappointingly.
Monty Don. Let's look him up. Let's see who Monty Don is.
Monty Don,
Japanese Gardens.
No,
there is Monty Don. No, Don. Not Dom. That's why we're getting it wrong.
There
Monty Don.
Yeah.
English television presenter, writer and speaker on horticulture.
Look at his real name. Montague Dennis Wyatt Don.
See, that's good. He should
OBE.
have kept that. He does have an OBE.
It's a very cool name, isn't it?
Yeah, Monty Don. Well, there we go. He's a Fujifilm user by the sound of it.
Born in Berlin. There you go.
So should we launch off with the questions? You can go with the first one.
Okay. So I have who's this? This is Jeremy Baker. And he says, help. I use Lightroom and shoot RAW and JPEG. But once the RAW files are in Lightroom, I only seem to be able to convert some of them using XRAW Studio When importing from the camera into Lightroom, is there a particular setting of these you choose? Copy as DNG, copy, move, add. My suspicions are if I copied as a DNG, stops any processing of RAWs to JPEGs via XRAW Studio and the attached camera.
You lost me at hello.
Yeah, by the way, a great podcast, blah, blah, blah. Thank you very much, Jeremy. So if I'm reading this rightly, which I may well not be, well, I think the easiest way to explain this is tell you how I do things. So XRAW Studio is not a companion really for Lightroom. It's a standalone application that allows you to take RAW files that you've previously photographed or previously taken and convert in the camera to the JPEGs. Okay. Now, if you're using a GFX, I think possibly even a XH1, you can actually kick out TIFF files, but ultimately it's a JPEG. So XRAW Studio really is, you have to tether the camera to the computer. You don't need to have the camera, you don't need to have the memory card with the RAW files in them in the camera, but you do need to have the camera tethered to the computer. XRAW Studio then sends your RAW file down the cable to the camera then converts it back to the JPEG with the settings you've chosen on XRAW Studio, and then it sucks them back into the computer as JPEGs. Lightroom...
need a round of applause for that.
Yeah. Lightroom... I do have a fully functioning video about that on my YouTube channel, by the way. Yes.
Oh, my word.
Plug. So Lightroom, the way that I use Lightroom essentially is I will do my culling before I take anything into Lightroom, whether it's RAW or JPEGs. I have the setting in Lightroom that says treat RAW and JPEG files next to each other separately, so they both come in. I do not convert to DNGs at all, ever. I never have done. And the whole DNG thing, by the way, was that's an Adobe standard.
Yeah.
And
I've never converted to DNG.
No. Well, originally I think the premise from Adobe was, look, we need an industry standard RAW format.
Right.
Okay, so they invented DNG.
Yeah.
And the idea was that if
digital negative.
Correct, I think that's what it stands for.
Yeah.
And the idea was that this is way before Fujifilm and Sony and all those kind of things were doing their thing, I guess. But the idea was that if Canon or Nikon or the big DSLR manufacturers went pop, or there was no support for their RAW files in the future, there would be a always available open source DNG format.
Of course.
That was the plan. However, I believe, and I may be wrong, so I'm sure we will get the answers via email if I'm not right. I believe that the DNG format was never fully opened up by Adobe. Wow. So ultimately, whilst it's a good thing, you create a DNG, you've got all full RAW editing capabilities with it, but in the end, if DNG stops getting supported, where do you go then? So, I don't convert to DNG. I don't really see any need to do that. RAW files into Lightroom, and away you go. Or Capture One, or Alien Skin Exposure, as I use now.
Do you use Alien Skin over Lightroom?
I don't use it exclusively, but I'm using it more and more and more.
Right, okay. What was your reason for that?
Well, I really like the processing of the files in Alien Skin. It doesn't have the full capability of Lightroom. It's not quite as good workflow wise, but they're getting better. So currently I think Alien Skin's on version 4, and you can do things like the equivalent of smart collections and stuff like that in Alien Skin now, which was what was holding me back with version 3. And Alien Skin's great, and you know what, I'll continue to pay my whatever it is, £47 a month to Adobe, but for people who only need a RAW processor, and a very good one with lots of great film simulations, it's a one-off fee, isn't it? Yeah. So there's a lot of people use things like Alien Skin, and Capture One, I believe, is a one-off fee. I think. Again, I don't use that at the moment, so I'm not sure whether that's subscription. But there's a Fujifilm specific version of that.
Yeah.
So there's lots of options. But the whole thing about DNG, it's the key question here. The key part of the question is, my suspicions are if copied as a DNG stops any processing of RAWs to JPEGs via XRAW Studio, and I guess the answer to that is yes. I don't believe you can use DNGs in XRAW Studio and convert them to JPEGs. They need to be .raf files for Fujifilm RAW files.
Talking of .raf files, I've got a question we're going to come to in just a second. Before we do that, and I'm playing my joker early on this one, we've been given camera straps to give away. Now, Kev, you know more about simpler straps than I do because you've used them, you've seen them, and actually you met the simpler guy in New York.
In New York. Yeah, so simpler camera straps, really good kind of independent camera strap manufacturer. I've got a lot of their straps, and JP is the guy that runs it. I believe he owns it. Yeah, so I was at, what do they call it, some New York photo festival, whatever it was, and he just randomly walked
You're
up
so
to me.
showbiz. You actually go to so many of these things now, you don't even know what they're called anymore.
He randomly just walked up to me, shook me by the hand and said, "Hey, I'm JP, I run simpler camera straps," and just gave me a camera strap.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody else at the time, and I turned around and he'd gone. He'd kind of disappeared into the mist. But since then, I've spoken to him on email and everything, and they are very good camera straps. I use them especially for the street photography, and they're lightweight. They have the little clips and everything. Really nice.
Yeah, the clips is the bit that, because I've been using Peak Design, as you know, and I like those because you can unclip them from the camera, and that's really handy.
Yeah.
And Simpler do the same sort of thing, don't they?
Yeah, they do for some of the straps. I'm not sure it's on every single one of their models, but yeah, you can see there. We're looking at the website now. It's simplr.us. We will obviously link in the show notes on the website. They're cool. They're really nice. They're kind of industrial looking, but still very smart.
Yeah.
They're not, bright red rope and all that kind of stuff that some people like. Very functional camera straps, I find. Very cool. And like I say, JP has very kindly offered to give us a couple of straps to give away, and we thought the easiest way to do that, rather than do it as a competition, is to
kind of like a question of the week, one of our favourite questions of the week. So I'm playing my joker early. We've got some simpler straps to give away over the next few weeks or so. Maybe that's going to extend as well, which will be really nice as something we can use when we're picking out our favourite questions. I'm going very early with this one. One of the things that I love about the internet, by the way, and I'm still a little kid when it comes to this, is the fact that it joins us up with people all over the world. And I'm still, I know I should have gotten over this a long time ago, but whenever I see an email from somebody abroad to me, there's still a little skip in my step there. I like it. And this one comes from, now I had to go and look this up. I did some research on this in Mexico. Tijuana. Tijuana.
Yeah.
That's a dog, isn't it? Tijuana dog.
It's a beer as well, I think.
Well, Tijuana.
There you go.
That's what the man said.
Yeah.
But the woman says it slightly differently.
Tijuana.
See, I like him. Tijuana. But she does say it a lot better.
Tijuana.
See, yeah.
Yeah. But there's differences between Spanish
Tijuana.
and South American Spanish.
Tijuana. Are they the differences?
So perhaps it depends where the translation is coming from. So, for example, it's cerveza. Or cerveza.
Or cerveza. Just you to pick out the beer one. Anyway, this one's from Mexico. This one comes from, is it Asa? I should have looked that one up as well. Big hug from Tijuana in Mexico. Hi, Neil and Kevin. First of all, hello from Mexico. I just want to say I'm a big fan of the work that both of you produce, as well as the podcast. Keep rocking, my friends. I'm hoping to see if I could get your feedback on something. I've been shooting Nikon for the past 5 years, or Nikon, depending upon where you are in the world, of course, and recently switched to Fujifilm. Got the X-T3 and the 23 1.4, the 56 1.2 glass as well. I'm using the 56. It's been phenomenal, picture quality great, but I've been struggling with the quality image of the 23 1.4. Specifically, when I'm shooting a nearby subject, the quality, that's good. But as soon as the person or couple goes 5 meters away or more, I've noticed the quality is not at all what I was expecting. I'm including a RAF image, so this is why it plays back to the RAF thing. And let me just, I've got the RAF here. Now, I know this is podcasting and radio, so I'm going to zoom in a bit. You've got your mouse your side as well. So let me read the rest of it while you're zooming into that RAF image.
Yeah.
I'm including a RAF image of a recent shoot I did where I focused manually to make sure I'd nailed the focus. I'm constantly hearing this is an amazing lens, so I'm curious to get your opinion as to whether I'm having issues with the specific lens I bought, or just wrong expectations altogether. If I zoom in a bit toward the couple, I feel the image starts to pixelate too quickly, if that makes any sense, and at 100% the quality just seems bad. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can definitely see that the main people in the picture do appear soft, for sure.
Softer than you would expect?
Yeah, it doesn't look right. Definitely doesn't look right. But what I would say is
That tree, though, looks...
yeah, I don't know. I think the whole thing looks a little bit soft, but I don't think... I mean, you know, you
nice image, by the way.
Yeah, beautiful image. You can tell that's not taken in Swindon. You know, I guess what you'd have to do is test a few, lots of other images and all that kind of stuff. But to me, that does not look right. No. I think that's soft there. You know, the thing about the Fujifilm lenses or kind of mirrorless lenses in general is that they don't need calibrating, they don't need realigning or anything. But you can get, you know, bad lenses. It can happen. It might be a problem with the lens. It might be a contact.
Well, he did put on brackets here that he got it through eBay. Not that should make any difference, but maybe it's being clattered about or something like that.
That's definitely not quite right. My 23 is great. I mean, my 23 1.4 is the original one. I got it. I don't know. It's probably 6 years old now. Still, it's a workhorse. I have no issues whatsoever. Close up. I mean, all lenses are going to be sharper at certain apertures.
Yeah.
And I find that the 23 1.4 probably somewhere around 2.8 to 3.5 is its sharpest point.
That's the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot. But yeah, I mean, this just looks like a badly focused picture, which I'm sure it's not. And if it's being replicated in other images, then I would get that serviced, yeah.
Absolutely.
Double check the camera with other lenses as well, of course.
Thank you very much for your question from...
Tijuana.
He's going to get the strap.
Yep, simpler strap is coming to you, Asa.
Well,
so
we'll sort that out.
Thank you very, very much. Right, Kev, you go with the question.
Okay, so I have a question here from Bevan in New Zealand.
Hello, Bevan.
Question for Kevin, please. When shooting anything, including weddings in a documentary style on your X Pro 2, will you use an optical viewfinder with a small EVF overlay in the corner or relying purely on the EVF? Would be interested to know, especially as you shoot at such wide apertures. Okay, thanks, Bevan. And the answer actually is, if you'd asked me this question about the X Pro 1, I would tell you that I would be shooting a lot using the optical viewfinder. X Pro 2 obviously came along with what they call the hybrid viewfinder. So you can use the optical viewfinder and you have a little digital screen in the bottom right-hand corner that gives you an electronic view. So you can see the exposure, check focus, all of that kind of stuff. And the answer, honestly, is that I use the optical viewfinder almost all the time now.
Do you?
Sorry, the electronic viewfinder.
Oh, right, okay.
Electronic. The electronic viewfinder is so good. I notice no lag, no perceived issues, apart from in really low light conditions when I might pop over to the OVF. If I'm shooting with my X Pro 2 on the street, likewise with my X100F, and I'm shooting zone focusing, and occasionally I'll do this at weddings too, then I will use the optical viewfinder, because obviously I'm not looking through the viewfinder at that point.
No.
I'll use the optical viewfinder because it saves battery power. It's not going to be shown on the LCD on the back, etc., etc. But the fact is, I use the electronic viewfinder because it's so reliable now. And, I know that the optical viewfinder is part of the soul of the X Pro 2 and the X100, and, heaven forbid that they ever kind of took that away from it.
I don't think they'd do that.
No, I'm sure they wouldn't. But the fact is, less people use it than they used to, for sure.
Right.
It does give people a really good introduction to the Fujifilm system, because if they're coming from a DSLR background, obviously the optical viewfinder is DSLR-like. So, electronic viewfinder mostly for me on the X Pro 2.
Okay. This one's from Murray McMillan. Hi Neil, hi Kev, love the podcast, looking forward to the next one. Wanted to email in a question on gear. I've been chatting online to Mark Condon from Shot Kit. Of course we feature them last week, and specifically the GFX. I'd had a loan of the S last summer, ever since I've been wanting one, even more so with the new R model. I shoot all Fuji for weddings and personal work using the X-T3 and X Pro 2 and X100F. I've been reading reviews and considering a GFX 50R. Had chatted to Mark and he said other than the file sizes, he couldn't see much difference from the GFX to the X series in terms of image quality. Obviously opinions, etc. But I wanted to see what yours were, Kevin. Even in terms of printing, I'd have printed a wedding on Saturday for my X-T3, and my buddy and I were saying how nice it was, very detailed. I'm going to be doing more printing. It's a decision I've made this year and going forward. I don't especially this is why I'm reading this. I don't especially need a GFX. But as you know, sometimes it's not the need that wins, it's the want. And I've seen you, Kev, with the GFX. You didn't really need one, but you wanted one, and you had one for a while.
Yeah.
But you don't have one now.
No, I had my GFX 50S, and then the 50R came along, and I was involved in the kind of sample images for that. So yeah, I got rid of my GFX 50S pretty quick. Now, interestingly, I think this question rings a bell. So I wonder if Murray's already contacted me on social media about the same question, which is fine, of course. But yeah, the fact is the medium format sensor is better in terms of image quality, dynamic range, croppability, all of that stuff than the X-Trans sensor. I mean, that is obvious to me. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily the thing you would use for everything. I still shoot all my weddings, my street photography work, and 99% with my X-Trans sensor cameras. And when you print, it's blatantly obvious that it's a better sensor. Blatantly.
Yeah. I've seen some stuff at your office where you printed from the GFX. I think there's a picture of Albie in particular.
Yeah, with the tears and stuff. Yeah. Well, I think, I don't know, obviously we weren't privy to the conversation you had with Mark at ShotKit, but if you're not printing, or if you have a GFX 50R and all you ever do is stick pictures on Facebook, then
pointless.
It's pointless. Yeah, absolutely pointless. If you have a GFX 50R or 50S and you print, and you need to do fine retouching, your studio shooter or landscape photographer or anything, then the difference is there. It is there, and it's. I haven't seen anything from the GFX 100 that's come in, but that, I'm told, is another level again. I do know for a fact that the GFX 50R is outselling all of their expectations. They are, it's flying off the shelf, and there must be a reason for that. People are seeing the benefits of it, and of course it's, I don't know what, $3,500 or something. So, it's different, it's better, but it's not necessarily something to replace your X-Trans. If you're happy with that, and you need smaller, faster cameras, then X-Trans is the way to go.
Okay, let's have one more from you. Then we've got some thank yous to make.
Okay, so I have one from Alan Gump in San Francisco Bay Area. Now, Alan is going to be my question of the week.
We should have
that'll do it.
I will get one for next week.
Yeah,
I promise.
So Alan will get a simpler strap. Well done, Alan. And the question is, gents, first, many thanks for all that you are doing for us. Isn't that nice? Yeah. Kevin, recently you posted a video about applying street photography principles in your wedding photography. Yeah. You mentioned that you use spot metering. Can you please explain how you spot meter on a busy street with the rapidly changing tonal palette? And that's a really good question. And of course, we're talking about street photography today. Now, I'm not going to go into the intricacies of spot metering. Essentially, it's where the camera will meter for a much smaller part of the scene, and it will give you an exposure value for that based on whatever you're pointing at, essentially. Now, metering of any shape or size, all it's doing is giving you an exposure value, 3 values: ISO, shutter speed, aperture. And if you wish and you're happy with that meter reading, you can dial those 3 things in manually. The metering then obviously makes no difference because you're taking full control of it. So essentially, when I'm shooting on the street, I am not generally wandering around and rapidly taking pictures of different things. I will find a pool of light. I will meter for that light. So I will meter for that highlight area, often where there's a shadow. People are going to come out of the shadow into the highlight area. So I've used the spot meter in to meter on the highlight area. I've locked that in either manually if the light isn't changing too much, or using the AEL button, or just half depressing the shutter button to lock the exposure in. And then I just wait, put the camera by my chest, wait for something to happen, come into that zone, that area, and then click the button. Now, if I need to remeter very quickly...
That's a really patient approach to street photography. For all those people that think street photography is just see something, nail it, see something, nail it.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of that for, I mean, people do things different ways, don't they? And that's a good thing. But to remeter very quickly, all I'll do is point the camera right down again and point it at the highlighter, so at the ground, at where the light is, and half depress again. So I can do that very, very quickly, and then just kind of bring the camera up. So what I'm looking for with my street photography when I'm using that light is people coming out of shadow into highlight area. And of course, you can meter from something that's not necessarily what you want. So you can lock the focus, you can meter from a pool of light maybe coming from a window or something, half depress, recompose, shoot. So you're taking a meter reading from somewhere else. That's another way of doing it.
I love that shadow play way of working in street photography. That's the stuff I really like when I see it on Instagram, etc.
Yeah, I love it too. So, yep, that's the answer.
Well, we've got it's not so much of an interview of the week. I'll introduce it in a short while to you. Since we're doing something on street, I want to introduce you to quite a serious subject in just a moment's time. It seems almost frivolous to do this, but the light and shade of this program is what it's all about. Thank you very much for your reviews, etc., that you've been leaving for us. It's really kind of you. We really appreciate it. What we've done, because we thought it might be a little bit self-indulgent if we just sat here and read thank yous. So we've kind of wrapped it we're allowed to do just a minute of the self-indulgent minute. We're allowed one minute of it, and I tell you what, because you've got them there and I've got them here, we'll do one, then you, then me, then you, then... Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So here we go. As a Fuji shooter, I've been a huge fan of Kevin for years. Oh, there we go. That's nice.
Oh, bless.
You're fans. So while the podcast is great for those Fuji tips and chat, it's also a great resource for general photography too. Thank you, guys. That's Marky P. Excellent for all keen photographers.
I've got one from somebody called Now Wash Your Hands.
That's a cool name.
I bet you wasn't born like that. Really enjoying the content. You should do a live podcast from the photography show. Too late. It was last week, but it's a great idea.
That's a good one for next year. This one is from Daduran. It helps if you're into Fujifilm, but there's a lot of general interest photography stuff in there too. Two guys who obviously love what they do and provide advice and insight into a range of photography subjects with a slight bias to Fujifilm. A must listen for the stories and humour. Thank you very much.
Mad Jeff. I know a couple of Mad Jeffs. A slick production that's a good listen. Engaging, controversial. Conversational.
Controversial?
And interesting to all photographers, not only Fuji shooters or...
That's it. You're not allowed to do any more. Who is it from?
Mad Jeff.
Sorry, Mad Jeff.
I only got Mad Jeff and keep Now Wash Your Hands.
I'm sorry about that.
You had 3. That's not fair.
I didn't know.
I'll start next week.
I didn't know we were counting. There we go.
Thank you, everybody, though. So, and obviously on that point, that if you do, can you leave us a review? We prefer positive, but your integrity is important. It really does help us.
Our topic today is street photography, coming up soon, directed really by a question received from a listener. And so this feels like an appropriate time to introduce this week's featured interview, which is with the photojournalist Jason Florio, who I met on my recent filming visit to the Gambia, Kev. Mm-hmm. And Jason is a photojournalist that has spent time living in New York, Malta, the UK. He is a UK guy, and now he lives in West Africa and in the Gambia. And he was telling me about some time he had spent in Afghanistan and his journey back to America after that. I don't want to say too much more because I think that this next 10 minutes relays such a potent story from a photojournalist. Do you remember? Everybody remembers where they were 9/11 day, don't they? What were you doing?
I was working for Deutsche Bank in the city, believe it or not.
Do you remember the day, the time, what people said?
Yeah, I was in the front office, so all of the traders had all of the CNN, and there's just hundreds of screens, news
monitors everywhere.
And I just remember, kind of these gasps and looking up, and then everybody's head staring at these screens, and then literally watching it as it all unfolded. And then Deutsche Bank sent everybody home. They closed the whole trading floor. They closed everything down because obviously it was financial. And there was these terrible gossip mongers and rumours, and they were like, they're sending a plane over to Canary Wharf. Everybody has to get out of London. Yeah. And so it was carnage, absolute carnage. And of course, I know a lot of people in those days when I worked in that industry. I knew people that I luckily myself didn't know anybody personally, but people who sat on the same desk as me lost colleagues and friends that they worked with and stuff. Absolutely horrible. And I do remember it very vividly.
Well, I spoke with Jason in the Gambia, and we had a long podcast conversation, which will be on my general photography interview podcast called Breathe Pictures. So you'll hear the full. It must be about an hour with Jason. We talked about his work in the Mediterranean because he was covering the migrant crisis with the boats. And we talked about his work in Africa and the Gambia, and then we started with this. I asked him to tell me about a day in photography. And I expected really 3, 4, 5 minutes really of him telling me a particular story which would start this podcast that I was producing. What came out though over the next 10 minutes was not quite what I was expecting.
We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft.
Another one just hit the building. Wow. I was waiting at a table and I literally saw it seemed to be like a small plane.
American 11, are you trying to call?
Nobody moved. Everything was okay.
It's 8:54 right now, Stuart. Can you tell me when this happened exactly?
I would have to say about 10 minutes ago.
I heard first an explosion.
Unconfirmed report that a plane has crashed into one of the towers there. We are efforting more information on this subject.
And all of a sudden, stuff just started falling, like bricks and paper and everything.
We can't see a second plane in the picture. There we see the explosion.
Probably 4 to 8 floors.
I don't know which tower it is.
2,996 people lost their lives as a result of the horrific 9/11 attacks. 2,606 of those in and around the World Trade Center. The images made that day by members of the public and professional photojournalists pieced together a story of an unthinkable American tragedy. Photojournalist Jason Florio remembers that day.
So I was making a second journey into Afghanistan in 2001. In 2000, I'd travelled across Afghanistan to get a look at what the Taliban were up to, and my intentions were to head up into the north to be with Amir Shah Massoud, who was one of the big anti-Taliban commanders. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it in 2000, but a year later, the invitation was left open, and I was able to get up to see Massoud. Spent about a month up in the Panjshir Valley, where he was holed up against the Taliban, and spent pretty much all of August up there with him and his sort of crew of fighters. And I returned to New York right at the beginning of September, about September the 5th, and I went to show all my pictures to the agency, and they said, yeah, it looks really great. No, I couldn't sell them. No one was interested in Afghan pictures, and I was just really disgruntled. September the 11th happened, and I live in Greenwich Village, and obviously it's literally sort of walking distance to the Twin Towers. I was actually at a friend's house when I got the phone call from my agent and said, look, something's happened at the Twin Towers.
You didn't hear anything?
I should go back. I did actually hear something. I heard a plane go over, and I thought, that's really... Do you want me to go back? Or?
No.
Okay, so I did actually hear a plane go over, thinking, well, that was really low. Didn't really think too much about it. The phone rang, and it was my agent. He said, something's happened at the World Trade Center. I know you live close by. Do you think you can get down there? So I ran back to my apartment to get my gear. I had an Italian photographer friend staying there. He grabbed his stuff, and we started sort of going against the tide of people. We could see the towers were burning. And I ended up getting to the foot of the towers. My friend I was running with actually was wearing a pair of flip-flops. So he said, I'm going to go back and get properly equipped, kind of thing. So I said, okay, I'll meet you later. I'm sure it's just probably a small plane or something's happened. It's not going to be a big deal. I got to the foot of the towers, and I was with a bunch of policemen and some firemen, and we were just looking at these things burning, and I was sort of trying to compose pictures as best as possible. And the fireman said, there's bits of debris are starting to come down. I think we should pull back a little bit. And instead of pulling away north, we just basically turned to the right onto Vesey Street. And just as we took a few steps, I heard this massive explosion. And I looked around, I thought, there must have been... By that point, we did know the big planes had hit. But we thought, maybe there was another bomb in the building, and that's what's exploded. Didn't realize a tower was coming down. Anyway, I started sprinting up the block. I put the camera behind me and just fired off about 4 very wobbly frames of dust and debris, and it felt like I was running in slow motion. It was the strangest sensation, and I realized when I went back later on that street has a small incline to it, so it did sort of feel I was sort of fighting this sort of movement. I got up to the corner, which was just maybe about 100 feet away, and there's a small entrance to the World Trade Center subway station, and I just literally went down the stairs because the dust had caught up with me by that point, and I just went tumbling down the stairs, ended up at the bottom of the stairs, and I had a Contax G2 camera with me and a Canon EOS, all film cameras obviously back then. And I realized the viewfinder had got smashed on my G2, and I was more concerned about the equipment. And then I realized I couldn't actually breathe because so much dust had gone in there. And I started to have a minor panic attack, I would say, because I was like, oh my God, I've got too close. I'm not going to get out of here. And then I heard some voices, and so I had this visualization that I would be able to get onto the tracks, and with these other people, we'd be able to walk up the subway tunnel. The people I was with were actually ended up being police officers, and they had kind of they had some sort of vests on. So I remember I sort of held on to them, and we sort of started to make our way through this tunnel, but we popped up on the other side of the street on Broadway, and it was just this insane scene. It was just, the air was filled with the dust. It was sort of almost yellowish in color.
Do you remember the smell?
At that point, I don't remember it, but it was something that stayed in the air in New York for a good 2 or 3 weeks. It was this very acrid, burning smell. And sometimes there's things that remind me of that, and I'm immediately taken back to that moment. But at that point, I remember just trying to breathe. I had all this dust in my throat, and there was an ambulance that was parked there. And I remember trying to open the door of the ambulance. I thought, well, I can get in there and get a bit of air. But some firemen caught up with us, and they took us to, there was a small deli. It's called the Stage Door Deli. It's just about a block away from the World Trade Center. And in there was a load of policemen, there were some firemen. Everyone was just completely covered in white dust. There was Ruth Frempson. She was a big New York Times photographer, and she actually won a Pulitzer Prize for the photograph that she took inside of the deli there. So I sort of stayed in there for, I think, about 20 minutes, just trying to drink water and kind of get all this dust out.
You were pouring water over
heads, yeah. And it was just a sort of a very sort of strange scene. I don't remember the sound. It felt very quiet. I'm sure there was sirens and things, but it's almost I live that moment back through the pictures, and obviously the pictures are silent. And I think got about 20 minutes into it, and I thought, you know what, I can't sit around in here. I need to get out and see what's going on. So I got out onto the street, and I saw a uniformed woman. I didn't think what department she was from, but she was with an officer who was down on the ground. I didn't know at that point, but he was really badly injured. He'd got his arm almost severed. And she was trying to help him. Other people were coming around. And I started taking pictures of this officer. And years later, we reconnected. We had two very different points of view of what happened at that moment. I was sure she said to me, "What are you doing? Have you got nothing else better to do?" And I said, "I'm just doing my effing job." She said I was actually really polite when we met years later, and I don't remember it that way, but I'm glad she remembers it that way. And then I decided to move on further down the block, and then again there was this massive rumble and explosion, and that was the second tower that was coming down. And actually, just moments before that, I'd called my apartment. I had another friend of mine staying there, and as I approached, it was one of the payphones. There was a guy standing at the payphone in all the dust, and he said, "I can't get through." And I said, "I can't get through on my mobile." And he said, "Oh, here's a quarter. Yeah, maybe you can get through. Call, what was that song? Here's a quarter. Call someone who cares."
You did get through.
And so I got through to Joanna, who was at the apartment, and I said, "Hey, Joanna, it's Jason. I'm down here." And she said, "I said I'm fine." And next minute, that was when the second tower came down. I literally dropped the receiver and started sprinting. So she remembers being on the other end of the phone, yeah, and just hearing the silence. And at that point, I got to Fulton Street subway station. I went down the stairs into that, and I ended up being with the ticket clerk in the office, and there was an FBI agent down there as well, and then we were discussing what we were going to do at that point. I was documenting it, but it was also happening to me at the same time as well, and to my friends. We were all, obviously completely shell-shocked by what had happened. Every morning I'd come out. I live on Waverley and 6th Avenue, and I'd come out onto the street, and the Twin Towers were right there. And often we'd sort of gauge the weather by whether you could see the tops of the towers or not. And after that, you get up, and it's such a shocking thing. It's incomprehensible to think that those buildings are not there.
Let's go, back up, come on.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a place that we all had if you'd been to New York, even if you hadn't been to New York, there's such iconic structures, and whether they're structures, you see them as sort of something that's very arrogant, or you see them as something of beauty, or just as a landmark, or whatever, or a feat of human endeavor. It's still just the audacity of what happened there is just so shocking. And even to this day, I get quite choked up about it still. Certain moments that happen, and it really penetrates me. Like the court officer who I mentioned, I reconnected with her a few years ago, and it was very emotional to sort of come back and retell. And her story was quite phenomenal because she had actually been in the South Tower when it collapsed. So just after I'd seen her, when I'd photographed her when she was helping this other officer, she had actually just got out of the rubble. Her commanding officer that she was with was killed next to her. They got thrown, and she miraculously survived without really any injuries. But her commanding officer was killed down there. So,
well, yeah. My thanks to Jason Florio for his time in recording a much longer podcast with me when I was spending time in the Gambia recently. But I thought, particularly since we're talking about street photography today, that was a very appropriate piece to play, and such powerful pictures from that day.
Yeah.
We'll put all the details to Jason's Instagram and his website into the show notes so that you can go and see his work as well. Right, let's get back to your email. Well, there's an email really that's launching off this week's topic, and it is from Emily Rainier. Hi, Kevin. I did get a mention here, and Neil, in brackets. Thanks for these podcasts. They really are fabulous. I wonder whether you could take the subject of street photography versus GDPR a bit further in your next podcast, which we're going to do right now. Kev, you talked about at length about your fear that we're in danger of losing decades of documentary photography because of these laws. I used to love street. In fact, it was street that really got me into shooting. But a few months ago, I got stopped a few times by either the police or members of the public for taking pictures, and I was absolutely within my right, or indeed was being very unintrusive. So to be honest with you, I actually started to feel as though I was stealing from people by trying to take shots discreetly. I felt so guilty every time I took a shot of someone without their permission that eventually my stride, my creativity, it vanished, and I decided to stop doing street. I don't regret this because I've turned to family photojournalism. Kind of thanks to you again, Kev, I think here. But I do still think about the dilemma, especially when I'm travelling and my camera is still velcroed to my hip. Documenting society and its quirks and trends is one thing, but I feel through Insta and indeed the world of photography, it was being plagued with street photographers who shoot for their ego and not to study our behaviours for the benefit of future generations. What are your thoughts? Where do you start? There's so many points there. Shall we start with the idea of being approached by people in the street? Because I know that's just wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
In this country, it's wrong. If you were in France, now, as we said before, very different privacy laws. But
absolutely.
In the UK, you can still shoot on the street.
You can, although there are some grey areas. And, for example, I was doing a workshop in London a couple of weeks ago, and we were stood outside of the Bank of England on the pavement. And we weren't taking pictures. I was actually explaining to people that you don't necessarily know for sure whether you're on private land or public land. And the security guard from the Bank of England came over to us, and he said, "Here
we go.
I've been told to come. My manager has told me to come and speak to you to see what you're doing."
So they've been watching you on CCTV.
Yeah, and bear in mind we weren't taking any pictures. We were talking about, and he took one look at our little Fujifilm cameras. And then he said, "Oh, I've got an XE2." And I said, "Oh, we're just doing a workshop, and just kind of teaching people, about the cameras and street photography and everything." And he said, "Oh, well, just so you're aware that you are, and bearing in mind this is the pavement that runs to the down to the tube station." He said, the Bank of England do own this pavement."
Funnily enough, I've shot a video with you there before.
Yeah, and you know what he said to me? He said, "If I was you, I would go over to the island, because there's the big island."
Yeah.
A lot of people think that the big shopping mall is the Bank of England, the one with the pillars and everything. That's not the Bank of England.
No, it's not. No,
it's the one on the other side. So he actually said, if you go over to the other side, you'll get better pictures anyway. So he was absolutely doing his job and absolutely fine and being very polite. He realised that we were not kind of menacing in any way, or we weren't there to take pictures of the bank and then sell them or anything like that. There are a couple of trends I find on YouTube, especially. I've bumped into a couple of videos where photographers seem to be going out of their way to rile up the police and the security guards and everything. Oh, just to be able to say, no, I'm allowed to do this. And I don't think that's a good thing either. That's just not good for the people who want to shoot naturally on the streets. So to go back to, there's a couple of points with Emily's email. I think the whole thing about GDPR, most people, GDPR was like the millennium bug. It kind of came at us a million miles an hour, and then the day after it kind of just disappeared.
Well, a lot of lawyers got very rich with it.
A lot of lawyers got very rich. Yeah. However, it is still a thing, and there are, you still, even in Europe and the places where you technically aren't supposed to shoot, you still there is this kind of element of artistic rights. Okay, in the UK at least, you can still, my understanding, okay, so it's important to say this is my understanding, you still can shoot in public places. If you take a picture, let's just say you take a picture of two people having sat down at a table having lunch, and one of those people is staring right at the camera and is very, very obviously it's easy to see who they are. You could recognize them. If that picture is then to be used for any kind of PR, marketing, book covers, anything where there's going to be kind of commercial money involved, then that's where it gets tricky, and then you should have a model release and an acceptance from the people that they would be used. Now, this is why we see a lot of street photography from the countries where it's become more tricky to shoot, that are very much more I don't know what's the words, kind of less context of the story, but more about the art. So a lot of shadow, a lot of silhouettes, a lot of kind of colour and everything, which are very beautiful pictures. I love them. But for me, and it sounds like for Emily too, that she's interested in documenting people and the history of it. And I don't want to go over it too many times, because I think I've mentioned it before. But what happens in 30 years' time when there is no pictures of this time? It just beggars belief. And this is all coming from GDPR and all of this other stuff is coming because of things like Facebook and the privacy, the way that they've infiltrated our privacy is causing problems for us. Now, I think that's an absolute terrible thing, because you walk into the street, you are photographed on CCTV. Every time a police car goes by you, they film everything. How many people have dash cams on their cars?
That's true.
Everything is recorded. Okay, absolutely everything. And there should be no, and I'm really passionate about this, there should be no reason, if you're taking a picture within an ethical boundary, i.e. you're not abusing the fact that you're taking that picture, then you should be able to do so, and those pictures should stand powerful. And I've said it before that a benign picture of somebody on a mobile phone today might be boring, but in 20-30 years time that picture will be a nostalgic picture. And that's critical, and we're losing it, and it drives me mad. So I was at the Cheltenham races on Wednesday. A couple of things happened.
You've been doing this a few years now.
A couple of things happened. First thing was I walked into a lamppost for the first time since I was 6 years old, and it really, really hurt.
You shouldn't be laughing.
Really hurt. Right. Everybody, 200 people around me laughed their heads off.
Were you drunk?
No, it was like 9:30 in the morning, so I'd only had a couple of beers.
There's only one other time in life where you're allowed to drink a couple of beers at 9:30 in the morning, and that's when you're at an airport.
Anyway, I was doing my thing at the Cheltenham races, which I'm not interested in the horses, I'm interested in the people. And the security guard came up to me and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm taking pictures." He said, "What are you taking pictures of?" I said, "I'm taking pictures of the people." He said, "Why are you taking pictures of the people?" I said, "Because I'm more interested in the people than the horses." He said, but maybe the people don't want you taking pictures of them. I said, I don't like going to the dentist, but I still go. And then he kind of shrugged and walked off. But the fact is, you know, he was within his rights also, because actually I was not in a public place, and you know, I don't take pictures that are abusive or anything, but that's what interests me. You know, that's what interests me, and people look at those pictures, and you know, Martin Parr was there as well, actually, not on the same day, but I read on I think on the Magnum blog that he was there, and of course he would have had accreditation and was there for a reason, etc., etc. But the fact that he's interested in the people can't possibly stop other people from being interested in it you know, and it's not about them selling accreditations or anything, you know. I mean, I actually have a press pass, but it's not, you know, I'm not going to wheel that out. It's irrelevant. It's documenting, it's storytelling, it's history. And I should get off my pedestal now.
No, not at all. I mean, I wanted to see if we could get Doogie Wallace on today's show. Unfortunately, he's finishing off a book, so he couldn't. But he has promised he's going to come on the show in the next couple of months,
good.
Which is great. But if you take Doogie Wallace and maybe Bruce Gilden as well, now their pictures, they're very intrusive, aren't they? Because that's march up to somebody, boom, bang, flash in the face, picture. You know, these people haven't given their, and then they're often used in. Well, he's working on a book now.
Yeah,
I dare say not every single one of those people has given him model release.
No, absolutely.
I'll ask him when he's on the podcast.
I absolutely, and so he will be able to verify the kind of rights and wrongs of it all. I mean, you know, I have all of Doogie's books. I have you know, I have the whole load of them. That film they made of him, I think it was Channel 4 around Harrods.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, him, Bruce Gilden, they are. You know, they're in your face and they kind of walk away with the pictures, and who knows? I don't know. I'd love to speak to him about it. I also spoke briefly at the photography show to Edmund Terracopian, who's a friend of both of ours, and he's a working press photographer, and you know, I mentioned to him that we get this question a lot, so I'm hoping that at some point in the future he'll come on as well. And he said, yeah, I'd love to talk, you know, with the caveat that it's not, you know, he's not a lawyer, he's not, you know, it's just one of those things that's you know, really annoys me that we even have to have these conversations.
Emily did say within her email as well, documenting society, its quirks and trends is one thing, but I feel through Insta, the world of photography, where it's now plagued with street photographers who shoot for their ego and not to study our behaviours. Do you think that's true?
Yeah. Damn right. Yeah. I mean, and also wedding photography, you know, I mean, how many people... I don't think anybody would admit it, but how many people go to a wedding, see a shot, stage it, set it up with a view to making it a competition entry or thinking about the likes on Instagram rather than thinking this picture is going to be great for the client. You know, the client seems to be secondary in many cases.
The currency of likes.
The currency, absolutely, currency. Yeah. Some people's currency is ego. And I've always thought that the downfall of Instagram will be ego. You know, the whole people who buy links, people who buy followers, you know, to a great scale, just because they want to be seen as you know, as being successful. It's just a shortcut. No, you don't get anywhere in life by taking shortcuts, and that's true of all of that stuff as well.
Absolutely. You had another question though. I should have hang on, let me get my troll effect. There we go.
Yeah, that's me.
That's Kevin at 9:30 in the morning. Give me a beer. You had another question on it, didn't you, actually, with regard to street stuff, didn't you?
I did. I had another question from Paul Carpenter, actually. Yeah. It's a very similar thing. Congrats on the podcast. At the end of the podcast, you touched briefly on the legalities of street photography. I'd love to do more of it. However, I'm becoming greatly concerned about the reactions I may receive. Same thing, exactly the same thing. Try not to be concerned. As long as you're not doing anything illegal, rude, bad-mannered, then, you know, what's the difference?
What would you say if somebody came up to you and asked to see what was on the back of your camera?
I'd show them.
Would you?
Yeah, absolutely, I'd show them.
And what if they said delete it?
I'd delete it. But, you know, I can't imagine that would ever happen. Nobody has ever asked me that, ever. So, you know, I'm giving that answer based on no experience. But, you know, I always say to people...
and how would it make you feel?
Well, if they asked me to delete it, I'd feel, you know, a little bit annoyed, perhaps. I mean, it depends what the picture was, of course. If it's just a snapshot of me, I'm doing on the streets, then I'll delete it.
Yeah.
But if, normally I always say to people, look, if somebody comes up to you and says, why did you take a picture of me? Then say, because I love your face, I love your hair, I love the coat you're wearing, the hat, whatever,
That Mullins is hitting on me.
I'm interested, yeah.
That's what they're thinking.
Sorry about the hair bit.
You deserve that.
And I just think it's pleasantries. And I actually spoke to somebody on Friday, I think it was, Graham, and he is, interestingly, is a social... he works in he's in education, but he educates people on social conflicts, right. Conflict management, all of that kind of stuff. And I talked to him about this idea.
So what would social conflict be?
Well, like
within the workplace, or
no, like world conflicts. And
okay.
It's a very, very interesting story actually he had. But so he'll go to places like South America and and kind of parades and all that kind of stuff. But he's an academic essentially, and he said exactly the same thing. In those kind of situations, you just honesty, integrity, politeness, and a smile. Now, I only allow myself to smile 35 times a month. So, I try and get all my street photography in at the beginning of the month.
As much
Once
as
I've
that.
run out of smiles, that's it. Look, I've just used up 2 more.
That's it.
But, that's it, isn't it? It's just people doing, it's like riding a BMX bike when we were kids. We used to be able to do that anywhere, and they were like, get off the pavement, get off this, do that, go to the park, do this. It's like, I really want to swear. I'm not going to swear, but it really just drives me nuts.
You can swear if you like. Go on, swear. Did that make you feel better?
Yeah, much better.
Good.
But I used up another smile.
That's it on Street for this week, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. I think generally, without going on too much about it, just enjoy it. It's a hobby. It's for fun. It's for enjoyment. Those people that go out there with an ambition to cause trouble, they're not street photographers. Look at things like.
Is being brazen perhaps a better way of doing it, though? I don't mean brazen rudely. I mean, if you're going to make a picture. Make a picture. Don't hide behind a lamppost. Pop out, dart, shoot, get back in again.
Yeah, I guess.
Just be obvious.
Look at things like the In Public Collective, great collective of street photographers. INPUBLIC.
In Public Collective.
In Public. Amazing set of street photographers on there. Matt Stewart, I think, is still a member of it. And he's gone on to become a Magnum nominee now. There it is, the In Public Collective.
That one.
There we go. No, the one above it. Oh, that's to Twitter. Anyway, we'll put the link in there. There's a lot of good people in there, a lot of different elements of street photography, and they're all they are all kind of doing their thing. They're documenting in different ways, and I think if I'm not 100% sure, but Matt Stewart's still there. So
Trent Park's on there.
Trent Park, David Gibson,
Merovitz,
Joel, Christophe Agu. There is loads on there.
Soul Lighter.
Oh, I love his stuff.
I've got the video of Soul Lighter. There's a DVD there, just there. Video, Grandad. What are you talking about? DVD of Soul Lighter's story. I
don't even have a DVD player anymore.
Well, nor do I. That's why they're sat there. I can't actually play them.
But some great Soul Lighter stuff on YouTube. I mean, you know what? Just explore, go look, understand that it's for most people, it's something you do for enjoyment. If you feel threatened or embarrassed by it, then try and beat through that fear. But don't let the tiny negatives win. And my only hope is that there's the millennials become the more powerful people, and the lunatics that are running the asylums right now get replaced by sensible people. Then laws and rules will be relaxed and everything else.
So street photography done. Thank you very much for your questions. It's a subject we will come back to in the future. It'd be great if Doogie comes on, and
Edmund.
It'd be great to have Edmund on. Absolutely. So this is a subject we're going to come back to.
Yeah.
So make sure you do keep sending your questions in on that particular one.
Click at fujicast.co.uk.
And we haven't mentioned it once today.
No,
which is terrible.
And also, you haven't mentioned the fact that Wales won the Grand Slam.
No, I was trying to avoid that one. Yeah. Did you enjoy that?
Shall I say it again?
Did you enjoy that?
That Wales won the... Oh, well, I didn't see it because I was given a presentation at the photography show.
You didn't answer any of my texts that I was sending to you.
My phone was buzzing away in my pocket.
I know, I kept sending you texts saying, you're going to win, because I knew if I kept sending that, you might think, oh, we're not. It's just going to... It's tempting fate.
Yeah.
But it didn't work.
There you go. We are the champions.
Yeah, I know you are, yeah. That's it for this week. Thank you very, very much for all your questions. Next week we're gonna deal a little bit with digital marketing. So that will cover what people's websites, their Instagram,
social media,
huge. I mean, I think that is definitely a subject that we're gonna have to come back to a couple of times. But that's what we're going to be doing on the FujiCast next week. Get your questions in to click at fujicast.co.uk. Right, payoffs. My Jack's going to do my payoff this week.
My dad's Instagram is Neil James. See his films on YouTube at Neil James Photo. His website is neiljames.com for pictures and one-to-one mentoring. And you can hear his other photography podcast, which is called Breathe Pictures, wherever you get your podcasts.
Alfie still hasn't done a payoff for you, has he?
No, I was too terrified. Yeah.
So it's going to have to be Rosa, I think, for the
I'll get him to do it.
For the foreseeable future. Or we could get Gemma to do it. Why not Gemma?
With all the swearing.
My dad's Instagram is Kevin Mullins Photography. See his films on YouTube at Documentary Eye. His website is kevinmullinsphotography.co.uk. Or for street workshops, training and everything Fujifilm, go to f16.click.
We'll see you next week. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.